Assalamu alaikum, everybody. This is welcome to a very special episode at the Prime headquarters. We have with us today a supply side economist, Rizwan Rawji. Rizwan Rawji is Pakistani by origin, but he currently resides in Belgium. He has been involved in international business. He's an entrepreneur himself, but also associated with the great Dr. Arthur Laffer, the father of the the father of the flat tax. He's a supply side economist, and I think that is what we really want to talk about right now. Welcome to the show, Rizwan Rawji. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to talk to you as well as the general crowd. I would just like to inform you that a supply side economist is basically an economist that has studies done by previous economists like Jean-Baptiste Say, a French economist, and he always said in his chapters that it's always the supply that creates the demand. The previous supply-siders that go back centuries is Ibn Khaldun, a well-known Arab scholar, and not only was he a scholar, he was a historian, a jurist, and he had done a lot of travels within the old 14th century Arab world, and he actually wrote a book called Muqaddama.
Oh.
And the book has a particular chapter in it which focuses on economics.
Right.
And in that particular one of the chapters, he clearly mentions that at the beginning of a dynasty, you have low tax rates and a high, wide tax base. At the end of a dynasty, you have high tax rates with the low and narrow base.
All right.
So basically, this is just the idea that comes around for today's Laffer curve.
Right. Let's talk about that. So you have been instrumental in bringing certain ideas to Pakistan. One of them, I think, foremost, is the idea of the flat tax. In fact, you were instrumental in bringing Dr. Arthur Laffer to Pakistan as well. Now, could you talk about the flat tax? What is it, and why is it good for Pakistan?
Well, the advantage of flat tax, first of all, it's fair, it's simple, and it's predictable.
Wait, so a flat tax is what? So you have
Basically, a flat tax means, for example, if you are looking at a flat tax on income, it's basically on your gross income,
right,
okay, without any deductions
right,
whatsoever. You take a rate, like a 10% rate or a 15% rate, basically you're paying that on your gross income that leads to the amount of money that you owe in taxes to the government.
right.
So if you were earning $1 million rupees, and if you had a flat tax of 10%, that means you have to give 1 lakh rupees to the government, period.
Right.
There's no deductions, no nothing, okay?
Right.
And it's the same that applies for somebody who's making 10 million rupees.
All right, so
He has to pay similarly the same rate, but he has to pay $1 million rupees on his 10 million rupees. So basically, everybody pays his fair share of income based on his capacity of his earnings. So it's actually the reverse of progressive taxation. If
Right.
basically everybody pays the same rate on their income without any deductions or whatever special reasons, whatever.
concessions.
And you can literally do it on a postcard, okay? And you can literally do it online on your mobile app, whatever. You basically take all your gross income from whatever source it is.
Right.
It's considered income, period. No more, no less. And you just pay a flat tax, and that flat tax depends on your current situation that you have in your economy. Some countries can adapt to 10%, some countries can adapt to 15%, some companies might have to adapt at 25%.
Right.
It all depends on your economic situation as per se. And the same flat tax should be applied on corporate income.
Right.
Okay? Corporate income is the same thing. A lot of corporations today don't pay any tax per se to how much they're actually earning before tax, because they have many provisions of deductions. Okay, we know that you can deduct it on plant and equipment. You can deduct it on your interest payments you're doing. You can take losses on your exchange rates, whatever. That is not permissible in a flat tax system. Basically, whatever the corporation makes before tax, you apply the same flat tax, whether it's 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, that corporation will have to pay a similar system that we have on individual income tax. So that flat tax applies to the corporates. And at the same time, a flat tax can be applied to your services, whether it's in goods or in other matters.
Right.
So basically, a flat tax is a flat tax on a VAT mode. That means basically what you do is you create one rate for your VAT or whatever you're calling a sales tax, which is on goods and whatever services. You just call it a VAT tax, a value-added tax, and that tax is also a tax based on the flat tax idea.
Right.
And that basically you can apply at a 5% rate or a 7% rate, but in my opinion, on a VAT, it should be no higher than 10, especially when it comes to the case of Pakistan.
All right.
Okay? But in some advanced countries, you can probably go it above to double-digit numbers. But I think in Pakistan, a flat rate VAT of 5% makes a lot more sense than where we are today.
Well, I've come across this in your writings as well. You are, of course, a prolific writer and get published in mainstream publications. That you basically advocate for these three taxes. Now, in Pakistan, you have so many different other types of taxes. A lot of the revenue collection is done through the indirect mode. Even the direct taxes are collected in the indirect mode. And then a major chunk of the tax revenue comes from tariffs and fees on trade. So do you think that those taxes are relevant, or do you think that they need to be put away?
Absolutely no relevance at all.
Right.
And actually, this whole blueprint of the tax structure, the fiscal structure we have in Pakistan today, should be completely eliminated.
All right.
Basically, you need to just wipe out the whole system per se, and create a whole new blueprint.
All right.
Okay? A flat tax for a country like Pakistan makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you why. Because I have experience in the current Eastern European countries, the so-called Eastern, but now they're called more Central European countries.
Right.
And when these countries actually got out of the communist system after the fall of the Soviet Union, most of these countries decided to go for a flat tax regime.
Right.
Okay? And the reason why they decided to go on the flat tax regime is because they knew that they need to compete with the other Western countries that were in their neighborhood. Okay? And they didn't have any advantage beyond the low work salary they had. The salary base was something like maybe $50 per month on the average. Maybe in some cases it was $100, $150. But that was not the main area of attracting the business. The main area of attracting business for these Central European countries, and I'm talking about countries like Slovakia or countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia.
Even, I believe Russia has a flat tax.
Yes, Russia did a flat tax, but they did it when Putin came to power.
Right.
That was in 2000 and 2001, I believe. So they started much later. But the other smaller countries of Central and Eastern Europe, they started immediately after the fall of communism, which was about in 91 or 92. And their economies took off. Okay, they introduced basically a flat tax on corporate. Most of these countries, they applied a 20% flat tax, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them had a very low income tax rate, it was around maybe 10 or 15%. Okay, and they did a value-added tax, probably something around maybe 15 or 18%, because this was a tax where they actually collected a lot of revenues from.
Right.
Okay, and this was on the VAT mode.
Right.
Okay, but some countries had different rates, but they all had the same principle of a flat tax. Now, these economies since then have grown non-stop, 5% plus. Now that's been almost like 25, 30 years now.
Right.
These economies have grown. Their per capita income earnings has also grown. They're not all in the same range as where the Western countries are, but some of them are maybe around $5,000 GDP per capita. Some may be a little less, some a little bit even more. Okay, but they're nowhere close to where they were when they were at about 100, 200, 300, 500 dollars per capita.
Right.
And in those times, labor was cheap. Today they're more on the average side. But they have attracted a lot of FDI. They've attracted a lot of attention from the international financial community. And even countries like Georgia, they introduced the flat tax, I believe, in the early 2000s.
Right.
So did Montenegro, I believe. So did Bulgaria, I believe. But they came a little later. But, when they started introducing the flat tax, the IMF was very critical. They were actually discouraging these countries to adopt a flat tax. And the IMF basically came with a report sometime around that time, 2000 or 2000 and something, that these countries are experimenting on something that may or may not work. But they said possibly it won't work and they'll revert back to the old system of progressive taxation. Well, the IMF was very wrong on it. They never reverted back to the progressive tax system.
But you do see a lot of support for the progressive tax system amongst policymakers, amongst policy practitioners. In Pakistan, we also see that it's been extremely difficult to move away from the progressiveness within the tax system. We had a maybe period in our history where the number of slabs were reduced by the government. There was some sense that the system needs to be less progressive. But now we're seeing more slabs being created in the most present budget. What is going on?
Yeah, but listen, when it comes to the status quo, status quo has always been a regime, a system that has been in place for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Revolutionary ideas are always taken with a pinch of salt.
Right.
Whether you're in Pakistan, whether you're in United States or any other countries of the global south. Experiments must be done in a bold manner. Okay, without being bold, you're not going to get anything done. Okay, you have to take the idea that what you're going to do is basically create a growth economy, and that's what really is important, is that you have to create an economic situation for any economy that will give you double-digit growth or maybe little less than that.
Right.
But if you really want to grow, you need to attract investment. You need to attract not only investment from outside, but investments within the country. You have to create entrepreneurship.
Right.
You need to create SOEs and basically create jobs.
Create SOEs or privatize them?
No, I mean, basically when you create jobs, I'm talking about purely on the private sector.
Right.
When I talk about jobs, it's basically jobs in the private sector.
Right.
They are the largest job creators
in Pakistan as well.
Whether you are in a Western economy or you're in the global South economy, government jobs are a very small percentage of the total amount of jobs that are needed in the economy.
Right.
So you basically need to create a supply of companies, supply of investors, supplies of foreign investors, and that can only be to attract by creating a very business-friendly, tax-friendly environment.
All right, let me ask you, Pakistan has gone through some severe inflation in the last 2 years. As a supply-side economist, how are you reading this? What were the causes you think behind this?
Well, I think inflation is not so much a supply-side subject. It's mostly it's a monetary subject.
Right.
Okay, inflation is basically too much money chasing too few goods.
I see.
Okay. When you talk about inflation in Pakistan, when you're talking about inflation in the United States, or you're talking about inflation in Turkey or Egypt, which is right now the reality, is that everybody's having an inflation problem. And that's basically is about money supply growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's about too much government spending. which actually leads to too much government printing money.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the central banks are obligated to print money because they have to cover the government's annual deficits. Okay.
Right. So you're saying that the State Bank of Pakistan has a role, and it have played a different role.
Every state bank or a central bank has a key role to play in controlling inflation. It's not the job of the federal government to tackle inflation. The object is to control inflation. That can only be done by the central banks. Now, in less developing countries like Pakistan or the rest of the global south, interest rates matter, but they don't matter so much. When you have an interest rate of 22%, you actually are creating a tax of 22%. Interest rate is nothing but a hidden tax.
Right.
Okay? And in a country like Pakistan or the other lesser developed countries, interest rates don't really make a big impact on inflation. It's the growth of the money supply that matters.
Right.
Okay, it's when you're creating too much government deficits, when you're running trillions of rupees of deficits, and I believe your deficit will probably be hitting something like about 7, 8, 9, or it's like unbelievable the amount of negative you have on your government balance sheet, and that creates a problem of your expenditure, of your general well-being, and that resorts to basically doing the only thing available is basically asking the central bank to print money so you can use that money to do your expenditure. And that's the wrong way to actually handle the situation. But the way the supply side kicks in picture is basically when you give a low tax environment, that creates a supply of goods, right? So when you have a supply of goods with the supply of money, you want to basically balance the two and cool off the inflation. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If you had Apple,
Right.
let's say Apple was money,
Right.
and you have orange,
Right.
goods.
The goods.
In an equilibrium economy, the value of one apple and one orange will be 1 to 1.
1-to-1.
Okay? So I've got one orange on one side, I got one apple here.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a money supply doubling, that now you got 2 apples.
You still only have one orange for.
So what's the price of the thing? It's not anymore 1 to 1. It's 2 apples to 1 orange.
Right.
That's inflation.
unless
You're creating more money and not enough goods. What you need to do is when you create 2 apples, you have to create 2 oranges. So basically, it becomes again 1 to 1.
I see.
That's the idea of supply side economics. It is based. The more apples you're creating and the lesser amount of oranges you create, that's inflation. So you need to have a supply side experiment done, and it has been proven that once you have a favorable tax environment, the amount of goods that you create, which in our instance is oranges, that will have a positive impact in the amount of money that the government creates. There's no harm in creating a money supply. But if the money supply doesn't match the economic growth, that's when you're in trouble. You understand? You have to, the money supply growth has to be in order for the amount of GDP that is of your economy. So if the GDP of the economy grows, then the actual money supply should actually grow. It should not be reduced. So basically, you create an equilibrium for your economy.
Right.
So study in monetary system is such, and I'm naming you a number one economist on money supply is Dr. Steve Hanke. Okay, he's a renowned economist on money supply, and he's a student of Milton Friedman's. He's also a personal friend of mine as well, just like Dr. Laffer. And he teaches at Johns Hopkins University. And his rule of the thumb formula is that for at least the US economy, that the money supply growth, his Hanke formula is that the money supply growth in the United States should grow annually at about 6%. And if that 6% is adhered to in a strict fashion, then you will get a 2% inflation rate result
Right.
annually per se. Recently, with this pandemic, what United States has done and European countries have done, they have actually pushed in so much money into the economy. Basically, what they've done is, added trillions and trillions of dollars and trillions of euros, and that has ruined the equation of the growth of the money supply. So now, instead of the 6%, all of a sudden your money supply growth has gone up to 9, 10, 11%, which actually resulted in your inflation rate following your growth of the money supply. And then what happened is your inflation rate skyrocketed to even as high as 9% in the United States and around 7%. So basically, the growth of the money supply is an indication of what is going to come after in terms of your inflation rate.
Right.
So you need to make sure that your money supply growth is adapted to the amount of the growth of your economy.
Right.
It's as simple as that. If people tell you that monetary policy is all about interest rates, controlling interest rates, or supply chain factors, or this or that, those are side indications.
Right.
But the real problem is the growth of the money supply, period.
Well, I'm sure you must also be abreast of the developments around the federal budget that was presented. I'm sure you must have also heard that Mohammad Aurangzeb, the new finance minister, his first budget speech, he spoke about, some massive reform such as privatization, such as reducing the government footprint, enhancing the private sector activities. And these are things that people like you and maybe Dr. Ali Salman have been talking about for a long time. Now, do you think that this finance minister and the sitting prime minister, Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, they have finally understood what needs to be done? Or do you think there's still some...
No, my answer is simply no. They don't know what they're doing, all right? I can't speak for the prime minister, okay? Because obviously... he doesn't run the economic side of the situation.
Right.
However, I firmly believe that the finance minister is primarily the responsible person that has to overlook the economic situation of the country. Okay, not only economics but also the finances as well. And to the same extent, I would say the state bank governor. Okay,
right.
A state bank governor has an equal importance in economic policies. So the state bank governor with the finance minister should work in tandem, and they should basically work for the betterment for the economy. And let me finish. I'm not done yet. So the bottom line is neither the finance minister nor the state bank governor actually understands economics, period. I'll be very straightforward to you. They're not economists. They're basically members that have studied throughout their life in the area of finance. The title of finance minister is a bit misleading, I'll tell you. This is not just for Pakistan. It also applies to the global south. People think that the best person to give economic advice is a finance minister that comes from a finance background. They don't. The people that really understand economics are the economists. Now, I'll give you an example. Milei of Argentina. Now, he's not the finance minister. He is actually the president. And he's an economist
as well
as a background. He understands economics and he's applying economics. However, I can't agree with everything he's been doing. He might be on the right track, but we won't know till down the road.
Yeah.
But there have been many others that have come into positions of finance ministries, but that have come from economic background. They have done relatively well. People coming from finance, especially the ones working for the World Bank or the IMF, they don't have a very good record. Okay, I consider them as bankers,
right.
Pure and simple. All right, it's their always attitude towards balancing the books.
Right.
Okay. Economics is not about balancing the books. Okay. Economics is about incentives. And the incentives can only come on one reasoning, and that's to give a free market economy with a low tax base economy, with an open economy, whether it's for trade, whether it's for this or whether it's for that. That's the whole idea. Free markets, free economy. Okay? That's what creates growth. That's what creates an economy to get out of this fiscal mess that we were on in. And I'm not just talking about Pakistan. This is the same situation that Egypt is going through. This is the same situation that Turkey is going through.
Right.
This is the same situation that Argentina is going through.
Yep.
Even they're having problems right now.
Right.
Okay? So what I'm saying is Pakistan is not unique. Budget, I'll briefly tell you, I didn't get a good night's sleep. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was basically watching my head and said, this is not a budget. This is not a growth budget. It's basically a balancing of budgeting. It's the way of looking at things from the arithmetic side, how to provide economic inputs to an economy.
Right.
Mine is more on economic thought, which is a thought on growth.
Right.
It's about widening the pie. Widening the pie means widening the base of the economy. On the contrary, what they have done with this budget is basically a budget of sustainability, and the word sustain, to be sustainable, to me means it's the remaining status quo. That means we are going to stay where we are, and basically that means we're going to stay and we're going to go deeper in the hole as we are.
But
Okay.
some people would describe it as surviving on the bare minimum.
Listen, there's no two way of the arguments. Either you eat 3 full meals a day, or you have 1 meal or none. Okay, Pakistan is heading towards the 1 meal and none situation.
Right.
Okay, which is not a good sign for
Right.
for the country itself as a whole. What you want to do is not only have 3 meals, but at the same time have the ability to even taste additional amount of availability of very particular delicacies that every little child wants and every parent wants for their families, occasion. So basically, this is the idea of prosperity. Prosperity cannot be created by having a harsh tax environment, and prosperity can only happen in a low tax environment. Name me one country in the history of the world that taxation has led to growth. Name me one high taxation that has led to growth. There's none of them. There is no country that has taxed itself to prosperity. So why is Pakistan choosing that route?
Right.
I mean, it's obvious. I mean, the idea is that you cannot tax yourself to prosperity.
I want to get
It's actually taxing yourself to misery. It's taxing yourself to misery. That's what it is.
right. I want to also get your perspective. I think maybe your philosophical perspective on this. That the federal government's budget, for example, has been increased. The outlay has been increased by some 30-odd%. At the same time, we know that the GDP growth rates that the government had set targets for were much, much less than this.
I'd say 3.5% is the target.
Exactly. And then, on top of that, the government, during these times of inflation and previous times of inflation, has also introduced salary increases for government employees between the range of 22 to 25%. Now, first of all, tell me, don't you think that an announcement of a salary increase for government employees is inflationary in nature?
No, I don't think so. I don't think salaries and raising indirect taxes, etc. Maybe for Pakistan, I would say your energy cost, and energy means your electricity cost,
Right.
your fuel cost for importation. That probably has an inflationary impact.
Contribution?
Because because don't forget, transport and energy consumption are a big proportion of your cost of production per se. For Pakistan and other global South countries, these things do matter. For advanced economies, they have no impact, whatever. However, I can tell you another major impact on inflation, and especially for Pakistan, is that when you have a weak currency and a currency that is devaluating over a period of time, that's inflationary. Okay, that's a definite case of inflation. So you got not ability not to control your money supply, not being able to control your value of your money. That means your convertibility of rupee into other hard currencies, whether you're talking about dollar, pounds, yen, whatever. Okay, when that currency starts weakening, you're basically costing a cost effect on your production.
Yeah.
And in Pakistan, obviously, we have a lot of input that's coming from imports. Okay, which also is a matter of concern.
Yes.
And the further issue is here that we have import suppression, which is not productive on the supply side perspective.
Right.
Import and exports are part of the same coin. Okay, you have to have imports in order to be able to export. It's simply as that. Okay, what's good for people that are trading in is good for the people that are trading out.
Right.
Okay, and if that is suppressed, you're basically creating an artificial situation. It's like the central bank trying to control the rupee rate. Okay, that's artificial. But if you follow a free market principle of low taxes, open economy, a central bank that lets the exchange rate float according to where the rupee should be versus the other foreign exchange, and if you have low tariffs, and I mean low means literally 0% tariffs, you have an economy that's going to be based on the supply of goods coming in for your production inputs, and that leads to their exports, that is export induced, and that basically harmonizes your current balance of trade. So when you have a current account deficit issue, there's nothing to be of concern. A current account balance issue is a normal issue in the idea of trade. It's David Ricardo, okay, the economist, all right, the classical economist. It's because it's the free trade that will lead you to a current account deficit or a surplus.
Right.
Now, a current account deficit doesn't mean your economy is doing bad, okay? And a current account surplus doesn't mean your economy is doing good either.
Right.
It's not an indication. It's the amount of GDP that you create from export and imports.
Right.
Because if you see the equation of what it means to calculate a GDP is basically investments with government spending, okay, with savings and with export and import, which is basically net export.
Net export.
Okay. Pakistan is always being dependent on government spending, GDP part of the equation, and the part of not investment, but basically government spending and not enough savings. Okay?
Right.
All right. These are the two issues, right? But the real part of the GNP that's important is the investment side and the export-import, which is the net export side.
Yeah. Tell me something. The new finance minister emphasized a policy of import substitution. Are you in favor of import substitution?
Absolutely not. It's a complete madness. You cannot control anything. Government has no right to control when it comes to what needs to be brought in and what needs to be brought out of the country. It's like the policies on agricultural products. I mean, Pakistan is a great country for agriculture, a huge bread basket for the region, just like Ukraine was before the Ukraine war, although they still are. And there are many other countries that are bread baskets. Argentina is a bread basket country.
Right.
They have enormous amount of potential for food exports. So is Brazil. Pakistan, in my opinion, is probably on the top 5 in the world when it comes to the idea of exporting food. I mean, Pakistan can surpass Vietnam in production of rice, in production of coffee, or many other products that are required worldwide. And I think in terms of agriculture, I think Pakistan has a potential of going into hundreds of billions of dollars of its export. But if the government enters into this scenario, it's because they're basically going to create the pricing. They're the ones going to create the quantities, and they're going to create the winners from the losers.
Yeah.
And that's not free market. It's not supply side economics. Supply side mean economics. You got to unleash yourself from the chains of the government, my friend. It's time that the government start undoing things rather than doing things. Every time they have a budget, they're doing wrong things, not good things. They should be undoing wrong things and basically doing good things,
right,
which they never do. Listen, the bottom line is yesterday's budget was a disaster. Okay? I'm going to be honest with you. It was a disaster. It was basically last year's budget on steroids.
All right. Last year's budget, steroids.
On steroids. Okay?
Right.
Basically, they've increased everything wrong they did by 15 to 20% from last year. It's nothing more than the last budget going on to steroids. That is bigger amount of spending, higher amount of taxation, more creation of money supply. Basically, they're already envisioning that basically the amount of money they're going to be in the hole from this 19 trillion budget they've created and the amount of taxation they're assuming to collect.
Right.
Basically tax and non-tax, I think 13 trillion, whatever. Okay. They're going to have a tough time even reaching 10 trillion. Trust me. Okay. And then, what they'll do is eventually they'll probably say, okay, maybe we want to do a mini budget, and the mini budget would be more taxes, and more taxes. So basically what you're going to kill the economy and nothing will change, and the situation will get from bad to worse. That's it.
Right.
It is anti-growth. There's nothing in there that shows that they're serious about making real reforms. It's basically pushing the numbers, calculating the things based on balancing the budget, achieving targets. This is all nonsense. This is what I call abacus economics.
Right.
Okay, abacus is the stuff that used to count in the old days. It's full of calculators and even before the slide rule, okay?
Right.
Okay, today we're not in that world, but these guys are all in that abacus part of our history.
Right.
Okay? They're absolutely not even close to the reality of where the situation is today globally in the world.
Right.
Today, every country has to compete with each other. There are 193 countries in this world. Pakistan thinks they're the only one. And they're the special one. You're not. Right. Pakistan is not special. It's special to me and you, but from people living outside, necessarily, it's not special. They've got 192 other countries to choose from.
Right.
Okay. 192 is a large number of countries. Okay, and most of these 192 countries beyond Pakistan, they're in the global south, and the money will always go to an economy that attracts investments. Okay, countries in the Far East have attracted investments like Vietnam did long time back. Now recently Cambodia is doing it, Laos is doing that, and they're all doing it by creating a supply side atmosphere, low tax rates, very good monetary policy, stable monetary policy, and giving all the incentives in terms of tariff for bringing in goods into the country and the amount of goods you can export. That means there's no barriers to trade whatsoever, and they are the ones who are attracting the. And I think the last statistics, I believe that over the last 5 years, these East Asian countries, I'm talking about Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, etc., etc. In the last 5 years, they've attracted $400 billion of FDI. Pakistan doesn't even do $1 billion a year. They've done $400 billion over the last 5 years. Now, why can't Pakistan join the club? Why? The only way Pakistan can join the club is by following their principles and basically copying what they've done to attract investments locally, investments from outside, whatever. But Pakistan always seems to be like that horse you see in the Gora Gari, the carts.
Can't look sideways.
Where they have this, right? They've got this one thing that's here and one thing out there. They don't really have a 180 degrees visual thing. They're basically looking at only on that one angle. Right. And that angle is not a decent angle. It's an angle, it's a road for self-destruction. Mm-hmm. It's a road for self-destruction. Okay? Yeah. And that's what Pakistan doesn't want and should not be doing it. Pakistan is a country with huge prospects. It's got a huge amount of people that are coming into the work world, especially the Pakistani youth. And the Pakistan's strongest point is it's a young generation, the new generation. I believe the age group of 18 to 24 is probably maybe 40% of your population. Large numbers are maybe not educated, but a good portion of that 40% are educated. And they are the people that you want to give incentives to get into the job market, to create their own private companies, self-made employees, what they call it, associated people, like you call over here.
Yeah, so tell me something. We've heard a lot of economists talking about similar things. We have Dr. Nadeemul Haq also pushing for reform and expenditure cuts. Now, if one was to ask you, if you were to advise the finance minister before the budget, and there were 3 recommendations that you could give to him, what would be your 3 recommendations?
Well, really honestly, I would first suggest to the finance minister is to actually read the Prime Tax Reform Commission report.
Yes, the new reform plan, yes.
Which just came out a couple of days ago, all right? This is something that has never been done in the history of Pakistan, okay? This is the first time you have a group of experts that have actually put their heads together and come out with a very explicit, detailed plan on tax reform.
Right.
Okay, it's 50 pages, but a lot of the 50 pages is a lot of statistics. The first 25 pages of the report I've read are the most important, which basically they're talking about the direct tax, the indirect taxes, the tariffs, regulations, what have you. This report, if it's read by the stakeholders, and I mean the finance minister, there's no need for me to go see him. If he's smart enough, he can read the report, pass it on to the prime minister and the other stakeholders and just say, listen, gentlemen, we don't have to look for Durkons or Mr. XYZ coming from a strange country to give us economic advice, especially tax advice. We have the experts right here on the ground. And this report was created by the tax experts. I mean, I know for the fact that the 2 of the people that are really the experts in this tax report, and I know them personally, is Kardar, Mr. Kardar. He's ex-governor of the
Shahid Kardar.
And at the same time, Zaidi, Mr. Zaidi. Shabzar Zaidi.
Former finance.
Yeah, these 2 have given a lot of input in this report because they have on-hands experience.
Right.
But however, Dr. Ali Saman of Prime has given his position as well from the supply side perspective. Dr. Nadeemul Haq and Dr. Mahmood Khalid. These are the known names out of PIDE that have done a tremendous job. So the bottom line is there's no need for me to go see the finance minister. There's no need for me to see the central bank governor. There's no need for me to see the prime minister. You have the experts here already on the ground. They have written in a very extensive tax study. And all these people need to do is read it, invite the people that have actually written this report, and ask them their opinion on every aspect of tax. And they will give you a straightforward answer that if you do this, you will get XYZ as a result. And if the finance minister is willing to listen and apply, they're there to help out.
Understood. So tax reform, it's very close to your heart. It's going to be your first recommendation.
For me, it's my baby.
Right.
For me, the only area where I firmly believe that I'm an expert is basically on taxation.
Right.
And that's tax reform. If Pakistan managed to just do tax reform, because there are many sorts of reform you can do.
Yeah.
The fiscal reform, when it comes to taxation, for me is the most important. The spending reform, it's beyond my capacity.
All right.
I am not a superhuman, and neither are most people that give government advice. Government spending is an issue that the government itself needs to tackle. Nobody can advise you to cut down your spending. The government themselves have to realize, and they have to do it. It's difficult, and then sometimes it's impossible. Okay, when you create government, it's very difficult to shrink the government. But when you create high taxes, it's very easy to cut those tax rates down. That can be done in a jiffy. Government spending is a nightmare. It can take years or even a decade to do, because basically you're trying to shrink something that's become a monster.
Right.
And you want to bring it to size, but that's not my area. The other area is tariffs. I'm not an expert on tariffs. Dr. Mansoor Ahmad who's part of the authors of this tax reform agenda. He's done a tremendous job on tariff policy, and he's an expert. I know him personally as well. He's an ex-WHO economist, and whatever he says, I completely agree with it. And if that is well read and applied, there's no need for me to see again the finance minister. I mean, it's all there. The area of monetary policy, that's also not my expertise. That can be done by whoever is in the. In fact, I believe Prime has come up with a sound money. Sound money study.
Sound money.
I don't know who the author is.
It is the same Shahid.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
He's probably the better person for advice. Okay, and he's the guy on the ground. So I think he'll be probably be a better person. And the area where I think I'm absolutely not an expert, but I firmly believe it needs to be done in Pakistan, and it needs to be done fast. And that is privatization. Okay, These are the 5 or 6 pillars of supply side economics. Privatization is a very difficult thing to do. Okay, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of it becomes too political. Okay, it's about jobs. It's about equity in the state company. There's a lot of issues. Okay, Pakistan can do it, but how fast they can do it is not my expertise.
Right.
But I can give an example is when the communist countries fell. Most of these countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. I know for the fact that when I actually had a cocktail meeting with the Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia, I asked him that how quickly was the privatization done, and he says we were doing 5 a day.
Wow, and we can't get one done.
They were doing 5 privatization. He says, Mr. Rawji, when you're stuck in mud, you want to get out of that mud, you accelerate your Jeep down to the lowest part of your pedal and just push your way throughout this muck that you've created.
As a Raji, you've got your eye on global economics, and I've heard you mention that we might be headed for a global recession as well. Now, but in light of that, if we are going into a recession globally, what are some of the consequences or problems that you foresee for Pakistan that need to be addressed in the coming maybe 5 years?
Well, I tell you what, the growth engines of the world are United States and China today. These are the 2 engines. China is cooling off, that's for sure. They're having a lot of problems when it comes to their real estate sector, but it's still a growing economy. I mean, they're going to be growing 5-6%. There's no doubt about it. Maybe down the road, India can become part of that engine, but they're not even close to where China is today. All right. The United States is they call the primo engine, and the United States is definitely not applying right economics. They're actually applying wrong policies on fiscal side, and they're applying wrong policies on the monetary side, and worse, they're applying wrong policies on the trade side. These are the 3 big disasters that can happen down the road. Already on money supply, they've done a terrible job. During the pandemic, they have basically pumped in so much money that the Federal Reserve balance sheet is literally doubled from where they were. I mean, if they were at $4 trillion, they went up to $8 trillion, the Fed balance sheet. However, now the Fed balance sheet is coming down. But the money supply was always in the economy, and that led to a lot of people saving or spending. That basically led to a shortage of goods versus too much supply of money that created the so-called inflation that we've seen in the last. But that inflation era is now slowly coming down.
Right.
And that's mainly because they've come down on the money supply growth. In fact, what they did is in 2022, the Federal Reserve actually went negative on their money supply growth. Throughout this period, they were positive 4%, 5%, 7% on the money supply growth. Now in 2022, then a sudden break on their economy, that this effect will finally come now in the following months. That means maybe 6 months from now, maybe 9 months from now. A negative money supply growth is an indication that recession is coming down the road. Now, when it will come, I don't know, but it will definitely come. And economic is always cyclical.
Right.
Okay. You can't have a growth, a boom, without not necessarily. I don't call it bust, but a slow growth.
Right.
Period. I think bust is a bit too drastic. I think the bust happened in 2008 with the global financial crisis. Okay. But I don't see a bust. I see a slowdown. But I envision it might happen in the next 6 months or whatever. And whether it will have an impact for Pakistan and the global south, yes, it will. Because when the global engine slows down, everything else slows down. Okay? If their economy slow down, that means they're going to buy less goods from you.
Yep.
And you're going to buy less goods from them.
So how do you suggest we insulate ourselves from the impact of this global recession?
We cannot insulate. We're living in a closed economy, which is the world. You can't have a closed economy called Pakistan. You can't have a closed economy called the United States. You can't have a closed economy that's called Japan. The world is a closed economy. And if Elon Musk gets to Mars 10 years down from now, then the global economy will be Mars inclusive with Earth. Mars will become part of our global economy, but we're not there yet. Okay? The world is a closed economy.
Right.
It's not individual countries and individuals, because everything is depending on what happens there affects us here. What happens in the East affects what happens in the West.
Right.
So you cannot insulate yourself. I mean, this idea is completely...
well, maybe not insulation, but the government of Pakistan could be...
You cannot prepare yourself for it. It's not like you're going to get ready for a battle. You cannot start armoring yourself.
Right.
You just can't. You just have to apply the right economic policies. That's your defense. That's your defense. Right?
Right.
That's how you prepare yourself for a calamity. Right?
Right.
Basically creating a supply side structure. Now I'll give you the earliest supply side economist is, alhamdulillah, known as Hazrat Ali alayhi salam. He was the original supply sider. And I read it.
Very unique perspective.
Yeah, well, actually, when he was the Imam, he was based in Kufa. And he actually wrote a letter that was written to the governor of Egypt at that time. But this letter never reached the governor of Egypt. Apparently, the person that was supposed to deliver was eliminated on the road.
That's it.
But the record of the letter is still there. The letter on the economic side, it's a letter just talks about basically how to run and govern. But the area of economics is clearly put in one paragraph of the letter. He says, "Dear Governor, make sure you tax your citizens lightly. Make sure you tax your citizens lightly." In those times, taxation was basically the amount the government collect in the product of granary, in the amount of grains, because Egypt was an agricultural society. Okay, he says, tax them low so they can create the supply of the goods over a period of time. The reason I'm asking you to do it, because Khuda na khasta, is there a calamity? If there's a drought, and they cannot produce one particular season, you have the granary reserves to feed the population. So you have to make sure that your supply side of your goods is always maintained. If you're going to tax them all of a sudden to a level they don't have the incentive to produce, they won't produce. There you will use up your existing stocks, and then when the calamity hits, you're dead. That's what he was telling the governor. That's supply side thought. Saving yourselves from an unknown situation, and unknown situations do happen. The pandemic was an unknown situation. Tomorrow, a serious global war may have unknown consequences. Famine, flood. I mean, we had flood recently in Pakistan. Who envisioned? We cannot predict what can happen tomorrow. But if you have a strong economy, you can save yourself out of that situation instead of going left, right, and center, begging for every other friend you have on the planet. I mean, it's about time Pakistan stopped becoming the beggar of the global planet. We become the beggars of the world. I mean, there's no point in Pakistan being labeled the beggar. Pakistan should be labeled as the provider.
Yeah.
That means we have the resources not only for ourselves, but we have enough resources for others as well. And Pakistan can do it. I guarantee you it. If they apply supply-side economics, inshallah, within 5 years, Pakistan will be on a threshold of an expansion that they have never seen in the history. That means non-stop growth of 8 to 10% over a generation. And that is when Pakistan may even surpass some of our surrounding neighbors to us. And I know, inshallah, that can be done, but not with dead brains that we have actually right now running government. These guys are all, brain dead, period. They don't have open minds. Again, I go back to my horse scenario. You've got these two patches on the horse, and they can only see this way. They can't see it right, they can't see it left. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess you can't go any further down.
Well, I think I've ended my statement well. I think we've covered a good part of the territory.
It was an excellent conversation, Rawji Saab. It would be a pleasure to have you more often on.
Well, I do come here once every 6 months. Maybe, inshallah, we'll see each other in 6 months.
Or maybe we'll get a chance to talk to you.
No, we will. I mean, I'll make time for it.
Right.
But like I said, it's always a pleasure meeting the group at Prime. I think you have done a tremendous job over the period of years. And thanks to Dr. Ali Salman, he has given the proper guidance. And he's a man of vision. And I think he'll get to where he wants to be. And I wish him all the best.
Well, it will take a few men of...
Well, it will. But, it's always a team effort.
Yeah. But I tell you, Rawji Saab, amongst all the people that I've spoken to till now, you are probably one of the most positive persons in terms of your future outlook.
Well, I always believe a glass is half full. It's never half empty. Mine is almost full. And that's where I want to see Pakistan. A glass full.
Wise
Inshallah.
Wise words, ji, wise words. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the special episode. Thank you, Rizwan Saab, for joining us as well. I think we got a really different perspective this time around, especially in terms of, talking about how supply-side economics can be applied to Pakistan's current situation, and maybe find or configure a way out that can carry us forward from this low-growth phase, from this low-income phase, from this really tight economic stranglehold that our government has incidentally put ourselves in because of very internal, very government-specific kinds of issues that have arisen. Thank you all for joining us. Until next time, Khud Hafiz.